Welcome to the Elevate podcast, brought to you by the Registered Master Builders. We talk to experts, advocates, and business owners in the construction industry to share their knowledge, insights, and experiences to help you build a better business and enjoy a better life. Now let the business building begin.
Ankit, welcome along to the Master Builders Elevate podcast. So good to have you on the show again.
Thank you for having me, Ryan. Great to be on your show.
Yeah, and I think we've got some really interesting things to cover today. There's been quite a lot going on at a national level around the budget. You've been out talking to the members with your regional summits. And I also spotted a great article that you wrote on LinkedIn. So I'm hoping you'll allow us to talk about that one a bit as well.
Sounds great.
Okay, let's kick off with budget because everyone loves a good chat about the budget. It's arrived. We know that the building and construction sector has been having, I think we could call it a tough time, a challenging time. What is it you're thinking about for the budget this year?
Well, the challenge, if you think at what's happening for building and construction, what's happening to our economy generally, and probably true for global economy, since 2020, we haven't had a year which we will call a normal year. So we've had COVID, supply chain challenges, labor shortages, inflation, interest rates increases, geopolitical tensions, tariff uncertainty, now fuel price shocks. So every time as a business in the last 6 years, we think things are moving towards normality, something else happens. And the consequence of that is it creates a lot of uncertainty in the minds of businesses. I think it puts a lot of stress on business leaders. It slows decision making, and it makes it harder for businesses to commit to growth. And when businesses are not investing into growth and businesses are not growing, then economies and countries stop growing. So that's a challenge I think New Zealand is facing, and it's a challenge I think most countries in the world are facing. So budget was an opportunity, I think, for the government to try and address some of these, I call uncertainty type issues, especially for building and construction. And a lot of feedback we have been providing and other industry bodies have been providing and business have been providing to the government. The government actually has some levers government can pull to start getting some long-term certainty back into our economy and for building and construction. And there are a lot of things businesses can do. So if I unpack the budget, so government has actually come out with some positive signals. So they have announced $7 billion in capital package for around building and infrastructure. Their capital is targeted towards infrastructure, housing, schools, hospitals, skills, and workforce. So I think that's quite positive. And all it does is, in the eyes of businesses, it creates a pipeline, which we can see. It adds confidence. And it also encourages people to start investing into businesses or start thinking about their businesses in much more positive terms. So I think businesses, from a business's perspective, especially for building and construction, it's quite a positive budget considering that New Zealand is operating in a fiscally constrained environment, especially from a government perspective, trying to reduce their deficit.
Indeed. And I think we often see the flow on of those big capital spends in an economy because it drives all sorts of things in the supply chain, doesn't it? It brings, other prices down. It starts creating momentum. I think the sentiment piece is incredibly important right now. I feel New Zealand is low on sentiment, and as long as we turn up at every barbecue and every meeting and saying, "Oh, isn't it bad?" I feel like it will be, and I think we have just as much responsibility as individuals and business owners to really change that sentiment by bringing some positivity to what's going on, as does the government to bring some things that really can deliver those infrastructure type programs also.
Yeah, and I think that's a very good point. So there are 2 points I think you're raising. It's context. So one context is that we need signals, which are positive signals. I think another element of context is, of course, the world is not the same to where it was in 2019. And I think that will be correct. If all of us feel things are not as good as they were since, where they were pre-COVID, I think that will be a true statement. But the context will be, how is New Zealand doing compared to other countries? And the time I've spent in Central Europe, time I've spent in North America, I think everywhere people have gone backwards. When you have a shock like COVID, it can take 10, 15 years for the world economy to recover. So when we compare ourselves to what other countries are going through, and in terms of unemployment, in terms of socioeconomic challenges, in terms of pressure on businesses, and in some cases, serious immigration issues.
Yes.
I think New Zealand is actually doing a lot better. So there's an element of context that things are not as good as they were in 2019. There's another element of context that we're actually doing really good compared to what the rest of the world is going through. And there's a lot of positivity if you think it that way. And I think your point is right. We just need to start looking at in our context slightly differently, and not only just look at negative. It's important to look at negative, but also find a lot of positive, which is around New Zealand and our country and our economy.
Sure. And those positive elements are not false positive. It's literally, as you're suggesting, looking for them. And, if we come back to the budget, some of these big, $7 billion package, that puts a lot of momentum into the economy. What do you think that will actually look like? So it's always one thing to do a nice budget announcement that says, oh, we're going to spend $7 billion. What do you think that will look like in terms of actual delivery?
Yes, it's a great point. So budget is intention. So budget is saying, well, this is the intention. What we need to do is convert that intention into delivery and impact. And what you do that is by making sure there's a visible pipeline. So the government has done that. So say, look, these are the areas we'll invest in. Then you need to have clear procurement. So we want to make sure the government agencies who will take charge in making sure these projects get delivered, they are quite clear in procurement and timelines. They are realistic to timeframes. There's fair allocation of risk, and there's a good collaboration between the government and the industry to go on and do these projects. The government has indicated that they will fast track some of these projects. So all these 7 billion, there are a lot of areas they've already identified the projects. So I think what we now need to do is make sure this is a great intention from the government. How does industry collaborate and work closely with the government, and in some cases continue to provide feedback that we convert this intention into really good outcome for our industry and for our country. When we start building some of this critical infrastructure, I think it will drive long-term growth for our communities and for, in a lot of cases, for our urban centers.
Okay, I'm going to put you on the spot here. You mentioned requirement or responsibility for industry to get in and make sure this happens. What role can Master Builders play in representing our members and making that happen?
Well, I think the biggest challenge for us as an industry is to get long-term growth. And we want to make sure the businesses are surviving and thriving on a long-term cycle. And to do that, government has a role to play to make sure it has got the right policies, it's focusing in the right areas, and also it's providing certainty around skills and around planning reforms. Industry has a responsibility, I think, to make sure we are continuing to be very productive as an industry. And we also have the right capability. And I also think we're operating in a world where adaptability becomes very important. So what I think our job as master builders, and I think my job as a CEO, is to make sure that we are not just pointing the finger at the government to say things are not good and we want government to do more. And of course, there are a lot of things governments can do which can make things better, is to also have a deep conversation around what we need to do as an industry to run a sustainable model and our businesses become long-term sustainable business. So those are these three things which we are focusing on, and we are communicating. How do we improve productivity? So that's around how do we get better technology innovations? How do we improve our systems? Second is capability. So we as an industry work as a shortage industry. So we either have shortage of work or we have shortage of workers. So we're currently in the shortage of work cycle. And I would not be surprised in the next 12 to 18 months, as economy starts recovering, we very quickly will flip and we'll move to a shortage of workers cycle. So how do we get ahead of this curve as an industry when we think about our capability and our workforce, that we're investing into the right people? We are looking ahead enough in the future that we are managing our workforce and capability in line with some of the work, which we think will flow through. And the third one is adaptability. So how do we help New Zealand businesses become more adaptable? How do we help them have better business models? How do we help improve the way we engage with our customers, have better partnerships? We are seeing some of these partnership models which are forming in our industry where businesses are coming together and partnering and creating better value for them and new ways of working. So I think the job of master builders is to stages. One is continue to work with government to make sure government policy investment making is in the right pathway that is supposed to the industry, but at the same time, continue to do deep engagement with our industry to make sure we improve on all these three dials.
Okay. Let's talk to the element of engaging with industry. Ankit, you've attended a number of regional summits around the country. I got some insight in this when I met with your COO to talk about this and what they'd been discovered. I'm curious, particularly in the context of work skill development, when you were talking to our members at the regional summits, what were some of the highlights you were hearing about what they were trying to do on the workforce and skill front? And are people talking about AI and how they might be able to use that in their businesses?
So that's a very interesting context. So I'll probably, there are two elements of this. If we just focus on workforce, so AI is coming and it's coming quite quickly. And there's a lot of work we are doing on AI. So there are two elements of AI. So one element of AI is going to start impacting on jobs. So we are already seeing young people will come into workforce and they may not be the same type of jobs which they were expecting. And we are seeing that in white collar jobs. So we have a problem as a country that a lot of young people who come out of tertiary education may not actually have the career pathways which have been very tried and tested traditional career pathways in New Zealand. So that's kind of one challenge we need to solve as a country. Second challenge we need to solve as a country, or at least from a building and construction perspective, is how do we make our building and construction sector more productive? So what we are seeing is for countries where they have strong trade pathways, countries like Germany and Switzerland, not only their unemployment rates are low. So when young people are coming out, they look at trade pathways and they look at university pathways as fairly equal. And based on where their interests are, they pick those pathways. So the countries which have strong trade pathways not only have lower unemployment and they're giving better options to the young people, which I think we need to do that in New Zealand, their building and construction sectors are more productive. And the reason they are more productive is if we get more young people get into trades, it does three things. For building and construction, it makes sure that we got more people coming in. So the shortage of workers we have, that issue disappears. We also know that productive industries have higher quality. So when you're getting young people in early and you're training them well, and your trade pathways are very well embedded into work and they're good training and skills, they become quality workers. And we know that if you have quality embedded in your workforce, it drives productivity. And we also know that young people are more digitally native. So they are embracing technology much more faster and in ways we can't even imagine. And they bring some of those skill and passion into the workforce. So the way I think about it is, and I think the conversation we've been having around summits is, how do we continue to work closely with the government to make sure trade is a very compelling career pathway option available for the young people? We have to do that as a country in any case, because with AI and disruption, we need to offer multiple options to young people. And if as an industry, we can attract those young people to come into trades, it will definitely help us grow our productivity and run a much more sustainable model than where we are today. So it's a massive opportunity for our industry. So that's probably the biggest conversation we have had around summits. The second conversation around summits, which has come out, is around connection. So when we started doing these summits, the goal was quite a simple goal. That when we do our national conference, we're wanting all our members to come into our national conference and we have all these amazing conversations, which we think are business changing. And I have a view that businesses stretch or shrink with the ambitions of their leaders. So if you get a leader in a business, who's stretching, and generally the business will stretch around the leader. And if the leaders don't have ambition and they retract back, their businesses retract back. So the more businesses we can help stretch through our conferences with amazing conversation we have, more businesses will stretch. So the whole concept behind summits was, let's take the summits to grassroots, because not every business is going to take 2 days off from their work, a business leader, and turn up to Auckland or wherever we have our national conference. What we have found is not only it's allowed us to connect. So I think this year we had over 1,000 people who attended our summits across the country. What we are finding is this connection piece. So people are coming into these summits because we're helping them, giving them pathways to stretch. But it's the conversation they're having with other business leaders is where I think the magic is happening. So when you start talking to other business leaders, a lot of times you get validation. So you're thinking, oh my God, I've got all this stuff. I don't want to let go of my people because I know at some stage work will pick up. And how do I deal with all of this? And then you come to our conferences and you realize other people are kind of dealing with the same challenges. And you go, all right, I'm not alone as a business leader. It's actually others are facing this problem too. So I think it gives a quite strong sense of validation of what you're going through. It also gives you confidence. So we are seeing a lot of people, and I've heard this feedback, that they came in and they spoke to a business who they thought was doing really well. And then they went, oh, actually, they're not so different from what we are doing. We actually either doing the same stuff or we can fine tune some stuff. So it actually gives people confidence on where they can get to and inspiration. So I also hear a lot of time somebody was saying, look, I've got having this challenge around consulting. And one of the business owners said, well, I'm doing this. And everybody thought that was a great idea. And so you can get ideas from what other people are doing. So what I think the summits are becoming, it's becoming a place for business leaders to come in and gather. And of course, we run some amazing sessions. We get these great leaders and speakers to talk about what you need to do as a business leader to stretch. And when you stretch, your business stretches and you grow. But what we are finding is the connection piece, which I think is creating a lot of resilience in this building community and a business leader community we have. So we'll probably keep investing on it. But that it's quite amazing to see this level of connection which is forming and what that connection is doing to business leaders.
And Ankit, was there a standout for you in regional summits, not in terms of the best, but something that comes to mind of a leader that is stretching and provided a good example for their peers?
A lot of examples. So I could probably give you 100 examples. One of the ones which stood out to me, I'll give you two, which I think were very interesting. One is one building. I did an AI session last year across some of the summits, and say, look, this AI is coming and you really need to do some of the stuff, not knowing how it's going to land with business leaders, especially in building and construction, because there's a perception that building and construction is not that tech savvy. And one of the owners of a business came to me and said, you came up and you talked about AI. We were kind of on the edges of AI. We weren't sure if it's something for our business, and we started playing with it. And they've just won a big project. And they said, if we weren't using AI, we wouldn't have won that project. And they take us through a process of how it got there. So I thought that was quite amazing that people, when they're coming up to these conferences, they're not just going back to their businesses and keep doing what they were doing. They're actually learning and taking some of these insights back. The second thing which we did with this summit, which we've never done before, is in our last national conference, we had an innovation speaker from Australia called Nigel Collins. And Nigel talked about that a big transformation which organizations do doesn't happen in big steps. It's actually in small steps. And they're actually finding little gaps in their business and they're plugging those gaps. And when you plug enough gaps, it actually creates big transformation. And a lot of those gaps are coming from your people. Your people know what those gaps are. So instead of being an idea finder, you have to be a gap finder, which was an amazing session. And Nigel told a story that he traveled across Australia on his motorbike and interviewed different businesses across Australia. And just to understand why some businesses were a lot more successful than other businesses. And he interviewed every type of business, from cafes to restaurants to engineering firms. And halfway through his trip, he started seeing this pattern repeating, that these businesses were finding gaps and filling those small gaps. So what I said to Nigel was, wouldn't it be amazing for Nigel and I to do a road trip like this in New Zealand? And we go and visit building and construction businesses and some of these businesses who are very successful in their regions, to see if we find a similar pattern. So Nigel and I have been doing a listening tour as a part of our summit process. So because we were traveling for summits in any case, and we start interviewing these business owners, and some are small residential business, some are large residential business, some are small commercial, some are very large commercial, and some are operating in regions which are growing. Some are operating in regions like Wellington, which is very depressed. And halfway through, when we had completed our listening tour, the same pattern started repeating itself. It was fascinating. So that's probably the most interesting thing I have done as a part of the summit. And some of the innovation which is happening in building and construction, The mindset that some of the leaders have is phenomenal. So we are capturing this all up, and Nigel will share that in our constructive national conference in September. And I think it'll be life-changing if businesses can learn from what are these innovative things these other businesses are doing. So that was probably my highlight of the summits. Other than, I think summits is a great place for business leaders to come together, share ideas, and form these connections. And I think these connections will bring more resilience to their businesses.
It's such a great insight, Ankit, and I think the landscape is littered with large transformation projects that have been a complete disaster. There's been one in the media today about New Zealand government, but that 1% better every day kind of mentality of what's the small gap we can plug today, and then the cumulative effect for a business of plugging, one of those a day or one of those a week, and the implications that has over the long-term sustainability, growth, profitability of the business is immense. It's such a good message. I love that you heard that from the listening tour. Firstly, that's real data from our real members, which is so valuable. And then I feel like it's such good advice. It feels like something that every business can undertake, rather than going, oh, I have to come up with some crazy new idea and I've got to completely change the way I do everything. It's like, let's get 1% better every day.
Yeah.
So good. Okay. Okay. Let's talk about your LinkedIn article you've recently posted. When the winds change, great leaders change tack. This came about, or at least you opened the article with an insight you had when you were watching an America's Cup race back in 2003. Can you give us a bit of insight into what you?
Well, there's another insight which only the readers of this podcast will get, because I can put that on LinkedIn. So when we were doing this listening tour, Nigel and I were talking to a business in Wellington. And, Wellington is quite depressed, probably as a city, probably the worst performing city. So our conversation with the business owner was, how are things? Things must be very tough. What are you doing? Expecting some negative feedback. And the CEO smiles and say, you know what? I've run my business like a sailboat. As winds change, we adjust our sails. And when the winds change more, we tack more. And he took us through this amazing story of how they've been tacking, and they're thriving as a business in Wellington economy, which is struggling. So I said to him, hey, look, this is a great idea. I've been thinking about this. So that gave me inspiration to write this article. And this is one of amazing insights which have come out of the listening tour. And effectively, one of the themes which has come out of the listening tour is all businesses are facing the same headwinds. And we travel across the country. But when we are meeting some of these leaders, they just had this amazing mindset. And in the end of the listening tour, I'm calling it a sailor's mindset. So some of these people were seeing headwinds as, why the market is not stronger. I hope the costs were lower. Consumer pipeline has just disappeared. I wish the consumers will start spending more, which is kind of what's in the media. But then we found these leaders who are going, well, this is the condition for everyone, right? So what do we do as a business to tack and take advantage of this? And they have started focusing on the conditions they have, not focusing on the condition they wish they had. And it's the mindset. And their businesses are thriving. So I spoke to a business in Wellington. They're saying they're making more profit they're making in this year than they've ever made in their history as an organization. But the way they run their business is quite different to how they were running their business 2 or 3 years back. So that was the inspiration behind this article that I should write this. And of course, first time I saw America's Cup, it took me a while to figure out, I think Team New Zealand was winning, but it was kind of going in the opposite direction. And it was over a breakfast, and I'm asking one of my friends, well, it's going in the opposite direction. What's happening? And I think the person was a sailor who was sitting next to me said that Team New Zealand is looking at the weather, and they have a much better understanding of how the weather will work out. And based on that, they are actually going, which looked like an opposite direction, to take the best advantage of the winds they've got. So that kind of tells you two things. One, they were really close to their winds. They understood the winds, and they were predicting when the winds will change. And then they were tacking their boat to take advantage of those winds. And I almost feel like that's what we are going through as an industry, as an economy. The winds are changing for New Zealand. I think if you look at New Zealand, the global winds are changing for our industry, for our businesses. And we could either sit and complain about it and hope the winds to change. And I don't think winds will ever go back to where they were in 2019. Or we could accept where the winds are and make changes and adjustments in our business. And I think the businesses who will do that and will share that in September as a part of listening tour are the businesses which are likely to thrive.
Indeed. That's such a good insight. Can you share an example of that business that you spoke to in Wellington and how they went from, or they've become more profitable in a less favorable wind condition, shall we call it? What's something they did? Was it about getting sharper on their costs? Did they change the way they were looking for work? Did they look for a different segment of the market? What was something that they achieved?
Well, it's the themes. I'm now giving away the listening tour, and Nigel will be listening to this and saying, "I'm giving all his secrets away." For that, so
it's just the teaser. It's the teaser to come.
Of course. So one thing all these businesses were describing, they almost were not describing them as building businesses. They were almost describing in their own way that they are in the business of managing customer experience. So their fascination with customer experience and fascination of customer engagement was quite different. So they understood the customer journey, they understood the key customer challenges, and they've done little things in their own way of making sure that customer experience was quite amazing. One of them had used an AI platform. So when they go to the customer side, they turn on this AI thing and they ask customers permission. And the conversation they're having on their renovation alterations the customers want to do or the change customers want to do, AI captures that accurately. And then when they went back to their business, they said within 15 minutes, I can convert that into a change spec and I can email that to the customer. And what it's doing is significantly improve the communication between them and their customers. So they are not using AI to reduce costs and increase margin. They are saying, how do we use technologies like AI for us to engage with our customers better? Some of them are realizing that when your business is doing well, customers come to you. When industry is in a downturn, customers don't come to you. So they're proactively calling all their prospects. They're constantly having these conversations. And their success rates is terrible if you think about it. They're saying, I think that success rate is 5%. If you call 100 people, you get 5 conversion. But 5 conversion is quite phenomenal in terms of conversion, right? So they are getting more no than yeses. But because they are proactively engaging, as customers are changing their mind or their conditions are changing or their confidence is improving, they are front of their mind. In doing that, a lot of people are using, I was talking to a business which is based in West Coast, and they're saying, recently, most of the work they've got is through Facebook reviews. So they've done some pieces of work and they've done a really good work and their customer had a great experience. So they went on Facebook and raved about the experience they had with this particular master builder. And a consequence of that, they're getting a lot more work. So it's actually finding in the markets they're operating in, they're finding different ways to create a value differentiation, selling or telling their stories in a different way, engaging with their customers in a different way. And all of that is creating different opportunities than what they would normally have when the conditions were different.
Then comes back to that sporting analogy. We always learn more from our losses than we do from our wins. And when Absolutely. We're in challenging wind conditions, it forces us to look at how could we do things differently. And it sounds like this is a great example of an organization that's done just that.
And another one which surprised me, this really surprised me. So I genuinely thought that the leaders we are talking to who are doing well have got a surviving mindset. So we walked into these conversations, listening to, thinking these leaders will come out and say, look, we're doing all of these things, so we'll survive the downturn, so we can thrive when the conditions get better. All the businesses we spoke as a part of the listening tour had a thriving mindset. They are thriving now. So they are not telling us that conditions are horrible. This is what we're doing in our business, so we can thrive at another day. They actually thriving. They had a thriving mindset. And in most cases, the business is thriving as a result of that. So I think mindset is, for me, come out as probably quite a significant difference between leaders who are able to navigate these conditions which are in front of us to the leaders who are in the process of figuring out how to navigate these conditions in a better way.
Yeah. Ankit, I was interviewing another construction leader earlier this week, and they put a lot of their success as an organization down to, yes, a thriving mindset, but also patience. And patience is a very hard thing, but they're always taking a 10 or 20-year view of what the organization is doing and how will that work. And that allows them to have very good relationships with organizations, because they're not just talking about what's the relationship today or this week or this month. They're like, hey, we want to have a relationship and partnership with you over the next 10 or 20 years. So what's the right decision for us to make today? So I think when you can combine both a thriving positive mindset and a long-term view, not easy, but if you combine those two things, you can achieve some really great things. Ankit, I just wanted to round this out. I thought you had a great summary at the end of your article. Maybe if I'll read the four headlines, and if you want to add in, please do. So, how good leaders tack when the winds change. Number one, focus on the conditions you have, not the conditions you wish you had. I think we've talked about that one significantly. Progress is not always a straight line. Is there anything you want to add around that one?
I think you said it really well. They're taking a long-term view. Only thing I would say is when you start calling all your prospects, it's an effort. When you start asking for Google reviews or feedback, when you start talking about your house of the year wins you've had, they may not turn into customers straight away. But what we are finding is when you keep doing some of this stuff, over a period of time, it actually starts creating momentum. So don't feel disheartened when you're picking up the phone and you're calling your prospects, you're going outside the box, you're asking people to do Google reviews, that you're expecting that they will have a result. So what we have found is some businesses have been asking for Google reviews for like 2 years or Facebook reviews. And after a while, they start converting into. So it's just thinking about what the right things we need to do in our business. Not every right thing will result in a right outcome straight away, but we are building these infrastructure. We are building these assets for our business, which is creating our business, giving more resilience to our business. And over a period of time, which is what you're saying, taking a slightly longer outlook, they start turning into a more positive outcome.
Indeed. Number three, stay close to your customers in the market. And I think we've talked extensively about that one, and prepare for the next gust of wind, which I feel like brings us nicely full circle back to what we were starting to talk about at the beginning with the budget, some additional investment in the construction sector, which we think will have a flow down, and that flip from, as you rightly put it, we've either got a shortage of work or a shortage of workers. And it's quite possible the shortage of workers is just around the corner. Ankit, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. Some really great insights. Love what you've been doing with the regional tour. Can't wait to hear some of those insights you had from your listening tour that you're going to reveal at Constructive, and would obviously highly recommend the members get along to Constructive in September. So thanks for sharing today. It's been a pleasure to chat with you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Ryan.